Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Fallen London. Today we're going to be carrying on with March's exceptional story, Slobgollion. And we need to travel to Watchmaker's Hill or Spite, either or. Oh no, there's a new exceptional story, oh no. I'm falling behind. Let's go to Spite first. And we need to make a note of the crime scene. We read through all of the crime scenes in the last episode, so I don't think I need to do that again. Just hide that for a second so I don't accidentally click it. We just need to make a note of what it says down here. So it's the eye drop, also known as the Tears of the Bazaar, I believe. We also have search the wardrobe, so then it's going to be just a normal eyeball. And finally, tongue. So that's going to be taste, I assume. Okay, let's travel back to Concord Square. We'll do them as we get them, I think. Let's speak with Mr. McIntosh. Okay, so we're going to start off with viscosity. Add oil, subtract saliva, multiply by mucus. Chart the false stars at Z if you're a sailor navigating strange currents. If you're navigating a conversation with a rubbery man, chart the slime. In the thickness of phlegm and coagulation of blood, there are whole constellations, and your handkerchief is a galaxy. Mr. McIntosh needs no sextant or astrolabe. He might need you to sneeze again, however, or drink some water. That last heading was rather dry. Next we need the eyeball, so vision, gaze into each other's eyes, try not to blink. The longer you look at Mr. McIntosh, the less you see. Colours swirl inside his eyes, outside his eyes. The world recedes, diminishes, dissolves. Nothing remains except his gaze, and your gaze, plunging into his like a diver for pearls. What pearls could you find down here in the watery abyss? What oysters might open their secret? Hinged shells, and what jewels do they hoard? How long can you even stay submerged? No longer. Your eyes sting. You have to blink. The rubbery corpse doesn't blink. His stare deepens. Finally, we need taste. You might want to hold your nose for this. Salt is pronounced, and there's a distinctly sour note. Citrus? Lemon? It must be something else, of course. Real lemons in the Neath are rarities, and they don't have such a fishy aftertaste. Your taste buds throb, your tongue spasms. Flavours laced with memories flood your palate, and Mr. McIntosh spasms too. His palate isn't confined to anything so limited as a mouth. He tastes the air itself with his bare skin. He tastes whatever you taste, sensing each chemical reaction and each accompanying emotion. When you recoil, he recoils. When you almost choke, he belches. Okay, let's consider the rubbery corpse's response. Mr. McIntosh takes your hand. His tentacles engulf your wrist, coiling around your forearm. His suction cups pulse. His flesh compels yours to quiver. In the shivers he sends through your bones, in the firing nerves and sweating pores, you comprehend his shape. How much space he occupies, how that space can be twisted, how it twists backwards through time, how the rubbery men became rubbery men. History is a landscape at your fingertips. You feel its growth, you sense individual cells born, flourish, and finally perish. You also feel something oily. There's a thin film clinging to Mr. McIntosh, so thin you could barely see it before. Now, it's soaking into you. Why is everything getting brighter? Fascinating, says the implacable detective. Brighter, you say? Nothing about this room has changed. A novel chemical interaction. It's that same eye-blistering colour from Officer K's wardrobe. Okay, and now finally we need to go to Watchmaker's Hill. To the wreck of the SS Halcyon, and let's write down what we need. We need to study the mud. Waves. I'm entirely sure what that's going to represent, but I'm sure it'll be something. The wreckage. The triangle, so vibrations. We know that from the other one. And finally, waves again. Makes sense. We are at sea. Okay, back to Concord Square. And we'll talk to Mr. McIntosh again. Ah, susurration. Whispers that rise and recede. Murmurs that surge. Your mouth moves, but you don't speak. Not with words. You mumble. You hiss and you spit. You drone and hum, mutter and groan, shaping syllables into rhythms that pound your palate and spray like Z-foam between your teeth. You sound the depths. You surface again, with intonations seized like sunken treasures from your voice box. Your mouth moves, and the air itself moves like the Untersee. Mr. McIntosh sways back and forth, rocking with the tide. And it was vibration, the right frequency for the right message. Your hums rumble and your throat reverberates. Your lungs expand until your rib cage shakes. Your vocal cords are strings that twang and shiver, sending little shockwaves through your flesh and through the air. Even your teeth, for ears that listen well enough, tremble. Mr. McIntosh doesn't have ears, but he can still hear your skull resonate like a skeletal tuning fork. His glands quiver with a sympathetic tone. You echo back and forth into each other. And then finally we want susurration again. I don't think I'll read it this time. And we shall consider the Rubbery corpse's response. Mr. McIntosh murmurs and spurts. You sense in his movements the wind and the waves. The stolen river rises. The Untersee roars, the SS Halcyon lists, and you feel every shiver in the ship's bones, every bolt that pops loose, every lurch. You're struggling with the captain, but you're not you. You're Mr. McIntosh, and the captain isn't Captain Whittaker. He's screaming for mercy, for his mother, for another chance. He doesn't get another chance. Coral eviscerates the hull. You plunge underwater, still locked in combat, with someone whose face melts, nose morphing, eyes realigning, until they resemble the implacable detective. What's wrong? He asks. You look like you've never seen a constable before. He pats your back. You cough and gag, but nothing comes out. Now that you've discovered the 3 crime scenes, your heightened sensitivity will allow you to probe a more delicate subject. Death. Pay another visit to the morgue. With a chunk of dead amber equipped, you'll be able to uncover 3 more clues for one final combination. We already did this. I came here thinking, oh, I'm going to unlock something, but it didn't actually happen. Is there new text here, or am I just... Okay, it's the same text. So I think we're just doing what we did before. So musical notes, is that going to be sound of some description? Officer K is sight. And Captain Whittaker is bones? Bones? I don't know what that is. Bones. Guess we'll find out. Let's go back to talk to Mr. McIntosh. I see we've unlocked a new one. Song. That's where we're starting. Your voice is an instrument. Do you recall how they came to that place, and they sang of their lightings and shapeful disgrace? Not disgrace. Not disgrace. No, not when you sing of it. Your voice coaxes an encouragement. Good, says the implacable detective. We want him to trust us. You remember the melody. So does Mr. McIntosh. Your song lifts the dead from their graves. Your song lifts the past from yesterday's tomb into today. Mr. McIntosh listens with every membrane, every quivering corpuscle, every tentacle splayed to embrace the music. Then we need an eyeball, vision, which we've already read. Don't think there's anything new there. And finally, contortion. Bend your bones. Now bend them more. You bend yourself. Not as much as a rubbery man, but as much as you can. Arms, legs, knees, toes, fingers, hands, ribs, jaws. You bend them all, and then still more. Even the most flexible contortionist would struggle to hold some of these shapes. But your bones speak, Mr. McIntosh. Oh, how they speak. Loudly, clearly, repeatedly. Mr. McIntosh flinches at every crunch. Let's consider his response. At first, you don't sense anything unusual. But then your skin prickles. The room starts to rock like a boat. Candles flicker, light bends, and the chunk of dead amber resonate. Mr. Martin McIntosh is singing. He's been singing all along, but now you can finally feel the music. It's everywhere. Each moment is a verse, emotions, instruments, with lyrical gestures and gestural lyrics in a tentacle's curl, a tingling spine, a shadow thrown across the floor, with grace notes in even the tiniest twitch. Waves roll through mid-air. Tides rise and fall. You can taste what Mr. McIntosh tasted, hear what he heard, smell the same aromas, the brine and the blood from his fateful night on the river. It hurts. Oh, I'm on the river. I died. Oh dear. There's nothing quite like an awkward conversation. Shadows and lights play around you like huzzah porpoises. Dead huzzah porpoises. Perhaps picked to the bone by scavengers, but frolicsome nevertheless. There's the lullaby of water against wood. Oars glide slowly through liquid darkness. Someone must be rowing you. But which river is this? You been here before? Attempt to look around. Difficult to see anything at all. Across the water, to the north, the prick finger wastes glitter, but their lights are clouded, lyrics rolling over lyrics, and shapes over shapes, as Mr. McIntosh layers harmonies. To the south, Watchmaker's Hill looms through the fog, but even the fog is a fog. You squint, you strain, you sense shadows moving like fish in a net. If the world itself were a net, and London no more than a shape woven into the mesh. What frolicsome fish indeed. Bony fish, xylophone fish, pressing against the net of the world from behind. How they clink and clatter. They splash beside the boat, and overhead and underfoot, and everywhere. Attempt to move. Your tentacles are constrained. Your tentacles? Yours? Surely these belong to Mr. McIntosh. His chorus, ever coiling, circles back and back again to tentacles. They feel like your own limbs. You tighten them around your attacker's throat. His tentacles tighten around yours. You're bound in battle, twisted and double twisted, struggling on the SS Halcyon's deck. But this isn't the SS Halcyon. Even as black coral rips through the hull, this deck doesn't leak. You're face down on wooden planks. You can't move your tentacles. They're tied with rope. And finally, let's attempt to speak. Communication, yet again, proves troublesome. Have you been gagged? Can't get a word out. But someone is talking to you. Rather, they're talking past you. Chattering over your head. Lively shipment tonight, says one voice. Too lively, growls another. Or to fetch a molar at Eel's Market. Mrs. Coffin pays double for tentacles. More voices keep chiming in. Who knew Mr. McIntosh could imitate accents so well? About the quality of certain ambiguous products and the prices these products might command at St. Richter's Feast and the Citadel of Liver, or even the far-flung Onyx Isles. We only have one option. We need to attempt to swim. Going overboard? Mind the undertow. You continue to float, buoyed by a crescendo, until you don't. Your blood congeals. Your eyes flutter. You can see Mr. McIntosh there, in the corner of his holding cell, and the implacable detective nearby. Because this is only a song, isn't it? Even if you feel the music in your very marrow, you're not really on the river. What's wrong? Asks the detective. You're not opening your... It's that colour again. That eye-blistering, uncanny colour. Every light beam bends, stretching into a spectrum. Green, Vyric, blue, Apocyan, and all the radiant rest. But there, right there, somewhere beyond oblivion, it, Slobgollion, floods through the net of the world. You're surrounded. You drown. Perhaps you'll never pronounce it quite like a rubbery man. You finally know what Slobgollion means. It's the colour that oozes between life and death. Most humans will never perceive it, but for the first time, you're aware when you cross the threshold. Death's country is always right here, cloaked by a colour that no living mind can fathom. Well, let's fathom it. Conveniently, you happen to be dead. You're not just a corpse. You're a rubbery corpse. And you're not just any rubbery corpse, you're entangled with a dead human. Human? Asks a hollow voice. Which one is supposedly human? That one, snaps another voice. Use your eyeballs. A bottle sloshes. A cork pops. You hear two spongy squishes, like hard-boiled eggs being forced into an undersized egg cup. Oh right, I see. You're hoisted onto a bony shoulder. You're carried, trussed like a pig across the deck, and then dumped unceremoniously. Miss Florence and Miss Florence are here. So is Captain Whittaker. Now you're here too, another bundle on the pile. Wait, says the first voice. Not those eyeballs. Oh. More sloshing, squishing. Oh. You're hoisted again. This time, you're carried further. The fog rolls into the distance. You can't see the Slobgollion as clearly. Every drop drains away from the world like water through a fishing net. When you're dumped next, you land in your own bed. It's Speak with the implacable detective at Concord Square to deliver your report and close the case of the Rubbery resurrection. Okay. Let's travel. How do we get back to our own bed? That seems like a valid question, doesn't it? Don't think I don't know what's happening. More shapely shenanigans, eh? Just like Officer K when he tried to commingle with those bloody smugglers. Thought I'd give him an edge, but it only gave me a headache. And more paperwork. He thumps the files on his desk once again. Were those pages always stained? And the documents stuffed in his drawers? But all soaked with that uncanny colour. Journals, ledgers, calendars. But the sergeant doesn't notice. While you were out prancing around, I'll have you know the squid escaped. Now guess who gets to write the report? I'm always cleaning up somebody else's mess. Whoops. Let's search for the implacable detective. You find her in the prisoner's holding cell. But there's no prisoner. Most of the beakers and buckets have been removed. The bubbling vats of amber are back in the implacable detective's private storage, sealed in an undisclosed cellar for future research. But the case files from the archives are still here. Up again so soon? She asks. I thought that you might need more time to recover. I am glad I was wrong. Clocks can be so unreliable in this city. She closes a journal that she was reviewing, sets aside her magnifying glass, and gestures for you to sit down. Then she gives you her full attention. Tell me everything. Let's discuss the Rubbery corpse. Before you debrief, is it true? Has Mr. McIntosh escaped? Did you know that mice can squeeze through cracks less than 1 inch wide? They flatten themselves. Their bones are incredibly flexible. Imagine if they had none. She shows you the crack in the wall where Mr. McIntosh achieved his exodus. You might have mistaken it for a scratched tally mark. Such scratches are abundant. We've already dispatched search parties to the Marius and Erling Gardens, but he might be as far as Flute Street. If he's down there, we won't catch him. So we have two options. We can either divulge every detail we remember, describe the river, the smugglers, the Slobgollion, down to the last dappled shadow. Or we can withhold certain privileged information. Privilege still meaning, of course, anything you think the cops shouldn't know. Let's divulge every detail. Even now, you struggle to separate your personal experience from Mr. McIntosh's song. Furthermore, within his song, the music itself overlapped. You felt his death on the stolen river bleed into his voyage down the river. You also felt both rivers flood this very holding cell, bearing you away from Concord Square to your own bed. Where is the dividing line? What happened to you, and what happened to Mr. McIntosh? How can you begin to sort the sensations? Cautiously, says the detective. If there's an invisible world right here, the ramifications are too great to predict. We can't let this leak. But he transcribes everything, filling pages with water and fog, bones and boatmen. Plural? The writing hand shakes. Yes, more than one boatman. How terrifying. Let's discuss the 4 homicides. We won't learn anything else without Mr. McIntosh, says the detective. As much as it pains me to agree with Sergeant Holly, it's time to close these cases. The implacable detective didn't reopen these cases to investigate the homicides themselves, but you uncovered numerous irregularities. Evidence of tampering at the crime scenes, evidence of missing evidence. Perhaps some clues are hidden in a sergeant's desk. Other clues were almost certainly destroyed before you could find them. The coroner's reports are more irregular than anything. Incompetent would be the word. But you didn't have reason to suspect that someone highly competent had moved the bodies, modified them, and then falsified the reports. Perhaps you can't prove who killed anyone. Or why, when, where, even with what. But that's because Concord Square doesn't want proof to exist. From Officer K to Sergeant Holly to the conciliatory coroner, every constable connected to this case has either suppressed or fabricated evidence. Who should you tell your suspicions? We can either report the irregularities to Sergeant Holly. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, says the sergeant. We'll earn favours with both the constables and the criminals. We can report the irregularities to the implacable detective. Leave this to me. We have mechanisms for conducting internal investigations. We'll earn favours with the constables. Or we could report the irregularities to the Rubbery men. Spread word in the right circles, and it will drip down to Flute Street. If I had a newspaper, I could report the irregularities to London, but I do not have a newspaper. I think I'm going to report the irregularities to the implacable detective. Once a smuggling ring is discovered, of course, it's Concord Square's responsibility to snuff it out. But sometimes lenience pays more than prosecution. In the case of Captain Whitaker's smuggling ring, monumentally more. Who would have suspected that Officer L and Officer J were accepting bribes to look the other way? If you hadn't tipped off the implacable detective, only Officer K's involvement might have been uncovered. She digs, and keeps digging, until Sergeant Holly himself agrees to testify against the Velocipede squad. Corruption like this always runs deeper than one man, says the detective. But those two? No more than convenient scapegoats. We'll have to remain vigilant. The wheels of justice turn slowly. Very slowly. Permanent burials at Hartcross Cemetery are uncommon, but the gravediggers will have their work cut out for them this week. Now that enough time has passed, and enough flesh has decayed, Concord Square is preparing to move the victims from the morgue. Once the bodies are buried, this case will be buried as well. Close the case of the Rubbery resurrection, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and ooze to ooze. Rather than 4 caskets, only 3 are ultimately needed. Captain Whitaker and Officer K are far too decomposed to ever return. Miss Florence is also impressively putrid, but Miss Florence, on the night before her interment, gasps. Concord Square doesn't inform you. In fact, months have passed before you learn about the Royal Bethlehem's newest lodger, a woman who claims to be her own sister. She also claims that her sister is dead. Needless to say, when Miss Florence insists that she's really Miss Florence, and not Miss Florence, she doesn't convince anyone to stop gossiping. You finish this exceptional story, but the chunk of dead amber is still warping your perception. Watch your opportunity deck for an uncanny colour. Let's see if we get lucky. Oh, that was easy. An uncanny colour. Sometimes you can still see it before you fall asleep on a constable's truncheon, in a devil's grin. It drips from the flit, and it washes against wolf-stag dogs. They serve it as a sauce at well-regarded restaurants. Every penny, when you look close, has at least one stain. The shuttered palace is spotted, and your lodgings are too. Let's contemplate the colour. Slobgollion, that aching, shapling colour, hurts so much whenever you notice it. It wells up around you everywhere, and the deeper you stare into its eye-blistering abyss, the more you appreciate why it hurts. Just as blue might suggest sorrow, or red, anger, or green, tranquility, so too does Slobgollion evoke emotions. But they aren't emotions that you're shaped to experience. You lack the synapses, the glands and the lobes that would translate the pain into something different. "What's that?" asks an echoing voice. "Contraband!" clacks another. Only hands reach over your shoulder. One plucks the chunk of dead amber away. See it vanish, sucked into the Slobgollion. And then the Slobgollion vanishes too. Interesting. Is that the end of the exceptional story? I'm going to assume it is. Well, thank you all very much for watching. I enjoyed that exceptional story quite a lot. I mean, I wish they talked more about why the murders happened and who did the murdering. There's a small part of my brain that kind of wants to know who the person who was dragged under the ocean was and stuff, but I don't know, maybe that'll come up some other time. Maybe this is the start of some larger story, who knows. But either way, I'm going to thank you all very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, let me know what you think. Your comments are greatly appreciated. Thank you again to the members of the channel and the coffee supporters. It really does mean the world to me and help me keep the channel going. But as always, I'll see you next time.